Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming to the first in our three-part series this summer of TLC Open Conversations. We are delighted to have two of our illustrious associate professors in computer science and security fire emergency management joining us for a conversation on digital footprints, among other questions and concerns. I'm Gina Ray Foster, the Teaching and Learning Center Director. I am going to turn things over to Maria and to Shweta. They'll introduce themselves and tell you how they want to conduct the session.
Thank you, Gina, for that lovely introduction. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. I'm Maria Maris. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Security, Fire, and Emergency Management. I'm the new director for the Center for Cybercrime Studies. My background is in cybercrime, digital forensics, and the evolution of transnational crime. Before joining John Jay, I was in the US Navy for about 7 years, where I worked as a command investigator, law enforcement specialist. So today, Shweta and I are going to talk to you a little bit about just data, the amount of information that's out there, and of course, some of the things that we feel, some of the ways in which it could be compromised, and of course, things that you can do to better protect your data and protect the systems and the other devices that you use. But before we begin, Shweta, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Maria. Hi, my name is Shweta Jain. I am in the Math and Computer Science Department. I'm the incoming interim director for the Masters in Digital Forensics and Cyber Security. I have been at CUNY for a while. Before joining John Jay, I was at York College. And before coming to academia, before coming to CUNY, I was at Rutgers as a research associate for 2 years. And then before that, I spent a year at a startup company developing technology, developing the hardware and software for wireless USB. That technology didn't go anywhere. Bluetooth was adapted as the alternative. And so wireless USB is unheard of. I have a PhD from Stony Brook University, computer science, and my bachelor's degree is in engineering, electronics, and telecommunications. I have been teaching graduate classes in security at John Jay in the master's program. I've taught the network security class, and I've taught architecture of a secure operating system class. So it's basically what I teach is the technology behind how the internet is secured, the protocols that are used, and the keys that are exchanged, and how the algorithms work. I don't emphasize on how the crime is conducted, but I do talk about what crimes are out there. And sometimes I can tell people when they ask me, I can tell them what is in the engineering of these communication protocols that causes those vulnerabilities and why they can be exploited in cybercrime. So today we want to keep this interactive. Maria and I discussed earlier that when we are going to talk about different related topics, and please jump in and ask questions as you have them. So should I share the slide?
Yes. So we have slides, not that we're going to be presenting for you, but it's to keep us honest as academics and to remind us of points that we want to make sure that we cover, because as most of you probably know in this room, that if you don't have these markers, we'll end up talking about some things and not the others. So welcome everybody again. Our first topic that we'll discuss, and I think Shweta, we should go just to the next slide. Our first topic is really to introduce how information about you exists within specific spaces, right? So I think the most accurate way for us to depict how your data is out there is through the icon that we see here, which is a digital footprint, right? And a digital footprint just basically is the data that's left behind by the use of any form of information or communication technology, right? And there are two types of digital footprints. There's an active digital footprint, right? And the active digital footprint is really the data that you provide. So anytime that you're putting your name, your email address, your phone number, or any form of data in an app, on a web form, even within a particular establishment, right, that then stores this information somewhere, you're creating this digital footprint from your personal information, right? This active digital footprint. But there's also another element to digital footprints, right? There's also the passive digital footprint. And this one isn't from any form of contribution of your data per se, but it's data that exists, that's left behind just because you use information and communication technology. So this would be the browsing history. This would be any other form of activity that you have utilizing the app, and all sorts of other forms of metadata that are collected by the devices and of course shared by the devices and those who control devices and sites where this data is obtained. So collectively, these active and passive digital traces that you leave really make up a digital profile of users, right? And the data that is part of that digital footprint can be compromised by cyber criminals. And this image here, this slide depicts some of the cyber crimes, but there are many more, right? Image-based sexual abuse is made possible through digital footprints, and image-based sexual abuse is the use of images and videos and other content to basically target women in a way that sexually exploits them, right? The term that's been used, but it's an unfortunate term, is revenge pornography to denote image-based sexual abuse. However, using that or using non-consensual pornography really doesn't drive home how impactful and harmful this is to women, because it's a form of technology-facilitated violence. Images that are posted online, data that's posted online can also be used to commit cyber stalking. Perpetrators have the information that they need to follow users online, but even offline as well, especially when individuals post their locations. And in some cases, apps post it for them if they've forgotten to remove those features that basically allow them to check into places. Theft can also occur from information, either from things that are posted on social media platforms, through websites, even data that's collected about you through your profiles online. It can be used to commit different forms of fraud or identity theft. And Shweta, I know you wanted to add something here, so I'll pass the floor over to you before I continue.
Sure. So basically, all of these things are possible because of the way the data is collected. As soon as we visit a website, they know our browser's fingerprint, meaning what type of browser we were using, and then it can take data that is related to us by simply storing the browser history or the sites we clicked on or any activity we perform. So for example, if we went on YouTube and watched a few videos, YouTube has now created a cookie in our browser's history. And so with the help of that cookie, YouTube can send us targeted suggestions. And all of this started with making everybody's life easier. So back in the early 2000s, people were doing research on targeted advertising. The idea was that, oh, let's give people what they're interested in. And so how do we do that? The internet actually does not support keeping any information or state about people. The original protocol was not designed for cyber stalking, cyber theft, identity theft. All of that was designed just to enable communication, not to store anybody's information. But then commercialization required the internet to do more. And so cookies, and I can switch to the next delicious slide. So cookies were created, the concept of cookies was created to keep the data related to people who are visiting these websites. So if you go somewhere on YouTube or a shopping website or doing a Google search, they would store a cookie on our browser history, and then they would store information about what are we doing on the internet. And so the next time we open the browser, go to the same site, now they know what we did in the past. So now they can help us by providing us interest-based content. So what were we interested in last time? So we were shopping for bags. Let's show you more bags, right? So it came with all, people who were working on this. They were primarily computer scientists, and then the marketing people were involved. And they were doing this to help people make their life easier. But then it became a weapon for all kinds of crimes. So now there are websites that really not providing any good service. They're actually out there to collect data.
Yes, and I'm glad that you mentioned that. That's data brokers.
Yes.
So they consolidate users' information, and for anyone who's accessed those sites, you can see that trying to take that information out of those sites is extremely difficult, and requires even more personal information and scanned identity documents in order to do this, which is problematic in and of itself. The reality is now that personal data is commodified, right? There's a saying, and it's a saying that I used to also repeat, and then I started thinking about it. It's called, if you're not paying for it, you are the product. But I think that we need to amend that statement, because the reality is today, even when we are paying for it, we're still the product, right? Our data in some way is still sold. So it's not as if they're providing you a service to trade your data. We're paying for something, and they're still using all of that information about us to make a profit, right? And to get us to buy more things, right? And then to get more of our information that will then help them make even a further profit. And I think that that's something that needs to be highlighted. And also the fact that, there are privacy policies and statements of sites that people can read, but they have very bland and generic words like log files and web beacons. So somebody looks at them and they're like, oh, that's not really much. But when you start actually unpacking or looking at the 8-font footnote that's all the way at the bottom that explains what that is, it tells you that it's your IP address. It's every activity you've made. It's the previous website that you've accessed. It's the content of the website. So if we think about this, with the type of technologies that we have today that can consolidate structured and unstructured data, right, and create this picture about profiles, this really creates a near complete map of individuals' private life, right? And that's all from just data that's collected from these sites and consolidated, right, and utilized in some way.
So how do we protect ourselves? We can't completely protect ourselves without going completely offline, but we can take some measures. One of that is to delete cookies, and another one is to use incognito browsers whenever we are not using our own computer. If we're not using our personal computer, that's definitely one thing you want to do, is use the incognito browser, and always sign out if you have logged into something.
Yeah, and I'd also like to add that any type of privacy enhancing browser is something that we should be using. Anyone who has forgotten to use one of those browsers then realized that every single activity before utilizing that browser was connected, and they can see these advertisements now and they know, oops, forgot to turn it on or forgot to use the right one. So this is a general recommendation for any type of activity. It's best to use the incognito browser. And for many individuals, they're like, why? I mean, everything is so simple. I type a website, all my information's there. I don't have to put in my password. That extra step that you're taking actually protects you. So it's not just about cookies, it's about protecting your privacy holistically. And I think it's extremely important to understand what you're giving up for that convenience that you're getting.
So one thing we all do is save our passwords. Let the browser save our passwords for us for the next time that we go to this website, and it will automatically populate our password. Now that's like, it's really convenient, but the honest truth is that none of these softwares were designed to be secure, perfectly secure, which means that as soon as there is a vulnerability found and somebody has exploited it, it's possible that your browser will release all your information to somebody who was smart enough to figure out that there was a backdoor into the browser that can be used to take away all of the data that was privately stored on the browser. So we are all guilty of using that same password everywhere. Like all the shopping sites have the same password, or if not, we have saved the password on our browser. But whenever we do that, we are actually opening ourselves up to theft. I know it's very hard to remember all different passwords if we use different passwords everywhere, but there are password managers. There are encrypted devices that you can have in your keyring. Only you can decrypt them and get your passwords from there. You can store those passwords there. There are solutions to be very safe. I have a question on the chat. I have a question about VPNs. When may I ask? I mean, you can ask now.
Thank you, Shweta.
Yeah.
I don't know whether the timing is right, but the VPN concept, I had a three-part question about that, if you have time. It was basically, how effective are they? How do I differentiate one service provider from another? And what about the partners of a particular vendor? Is it essentially, I'm vulnerable to that VPN's business partner, if you will? Anyway, thank you for letting me interject.
No, it's okay. So it's actually an excellent question. Virtual private networks, I covered it in an entire class, and then I give assignments. So VPNs, there are different types of VPNs.
Are you going to give me an assignment now? Is that what you're saying?
Homework
assignment, yes. So the two ways the VPNs are done. One is at the IP level, and one is at the at the upper level, at the SSH level. So basically, when you use a third-party VPN provider, your data is encrypted from you to the third-party provider. It's not, and then it's not encrypted all the way to the endpoint. If you're using Google's VPN, your data is encrypted from you, between you and Google's VPN service, but not beyond that. So Google's still seeing, Google is still able to keep your data. So VPN is used to protect the communication from anyone who's spying at you, like a rogue router or a network through which the data might pass, and you don't want that exposed there, right? So essentially, if you're using John Jay's VPN, we are able to use the applications that are installed on our server using that VPN. And the reason why we are able, so that's basically what we are trying to do is we are making an internal application available to an external computer. Internal application meaning a normally not available on the internet application. We're making that available to a home network, right? So our data is secure from our computer all the way to the VPN gateway at John Jay, but beyond that, within the John Jay network, the data is not secure. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, yeah. So that suggests to me the Tor browser then, which claims to encrypt it end to end. So it gets it, and then when the ultimate destination allegedly it's still encrypted so that nobody presumably would be able to lock in to my messaging with a Tor browser. Whereas it sounds like with a VPN, like a John Jay VPN, I'd be vulnerable not only at John Jay itself, but from John Jay to the ultimate recipients.
Yes. Yes. So Tor browser is different because with Tor browser, you get security at every layer because onion routing, your data is encrypted to the next router and then to the next router and so on. So nobody can trace the communication back to you. That's the purpose for the Tor browser. Yeah, go ahead.
And I am glad that you mentioned the Tor browser as well, because, but also don't forget that the Tor browser, and this is something, David, for you to think about as well, even at the bottom left-hand corner, it says the Tor browser is not enough to protect your anonymity. So it lets you know that it has to, in order to really protect yourself, right, and your anonymity, you need a layered approach to privacy protection. So it's not just the browser. You still need to have these other privacy enhancing techniques that you use in combination with the Tor browser to protect yourself.
Thank you.
And I think you mentioned something about the companies distinguishing and seeing how they share information. The reality is, for your last question, what we would have to do is read the terms of services and terms of use policies, which nobody likes to read except for myself, I'm realizing, but because you get all the way to the end and then it basically says that they own everything that you have.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. Which is why I don't read them.
Right. It makes you sad.
Yes.
But that's usually what will tell you who the third party, but it doesn't provide any level of specificity. And this is one of my biggest pet peeves with these policies, that you don't really know who these third parties are. They're very broad defined. It changes, right? So you have this almost unlimited supply of individuals that if they decide to work with in any capacity, this type of data can be sent to.
So I have, so Ellen has an excellent question about password managers, recommendations for password managers. Maria, do you have any recommendations?
I don't use a password manager personally.
I don't use them either. Yeah.
Yeah, I always jokingly say I'm 2 classes away from a tinfoil hat. I'm not giving something like that to any third party, but I know other people who use them very well. And I'm sure 10 years from now, when I start forgetting things, I'm going to change that policy. But for now, I don't have one. Do you use one?
No, I don't. I have a very good memory when it comes to phone numbers and passwords. So I don't use it, and that definitely sounds like an excuse. But there are password managers out there, and I can go back and create a list and share with everybody at the Faculty Senate technology meeting, and then we can share it with everybody else.
Yeah, but they're by no means an endorsement because both of us haven't even used it.
Yes, there won't be endorsements. Yeah, but I can find the list and build it up from there.
Yeah,
and there. So go ahead.
Oh, yeah, there's another question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you recommend the best browser? And I think this user is using Brave for the time being.
So I haven't used Brave. It really depends on the machine you're using. So Chrome is good. I've started using Microsoft Edge, and that's been very good. Both of them are based off of Chromium, and Chromium is an open source browser software. So both of them have the same software, the code base. I think Safari, so Mozilla Firefox I've lost interest in that. I haven't used it in a long time, but because I've been on Windows, I've been using Edge and Chrome.
We had a great comment in the chat in terms of the passwords of Post-its on bulletin boards. I would say no, as an investigator. That policy of leaving your passwords around were one of the first things we'd look at. We'd flip the keyboard because usually people would put a Post-it underneath with their passwords in order to, for computers and everything else that they had in the area. So definitely not Post-its in case somebody steals them.
There was another question about VPN by Patrick. So when it comes to VPNs, would you suggest using one that is not located within 5, 9, 14 eyes? Can you please explain that question, Patrick?
Yes. So pretty much with Five Eyes is an intelligence agency between like Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the UK, which is then kind of moved to Nine Eyes. So there's 9 countries, and now I believe we're up to 14. So it really comes down to like, you know, where your company is based from. So theoretically, what they're saying is that with your VPN service is located within one of these 9, 5, 9, or 14 countries, that surveillance companies such as like NSA or other stuff like that can gain access to it. Whereas finding a VPN service located in a country that is not within 5, 9, or 14, that you should have better protection, such as like NordVPN, which is based out of Panama.
So I don't use third-party VPNs. I just, yes, I don't use VPN for normal browsing. So the VPN service I use is only because I need to get into apps that are inside the John Jay network, and I wouldn't have access to it without VPN.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, you have to be careful to which country you actually get a VPN from, because, you know, you also have these other countries that the government would have access to your data anyway, that'll be beyond the aforementioned countries, right, that you mentioned. So that's definitely something that you would look at in terms of regulation and laws, and there's a balance. The reality is that governments all over the world can gain access to data, right? Intelligence agencies specifically. So, but it's an interesting question to ask. I mean, NordVPN is something that I've heard lots of individuals use, used in the past, but I can't wholeheartedly recommend it because it's another third-party vendor.
Yeah, and like I said before, your data is secure only up to that point, right. And after that, it's not.
I mean, anything that we're talking about today, we're talking about just bits and pieces of things that can provide some level of protection. That's really the unfortunate aspect of everything we're talking about today. There's no solution that we can say, oh, this would be a good way to protect your data holistically. It has to be a multifaceted approach to security and privacy always. And even then you're still limited, which I'm sorry to say seems quite bleak, but that's really the space that we're operating within today.
So Maria, I'm going to start you off with this cartoon.
Yeah, I cannot say how much I love this cartoon. I wish that this is exactly how we would start asking, you know, why is this enormous amount of data that people are requesting? Like, you show up somewhere and they're like, all right, give me your name, give me your phone number, give me your email. Why? Why do I have to give you this information, right? What is the purpose of it? How is it being used? Many times you might find that someone will tell you that you need this for X reason. And within commerce, right, here's a particularly problematic aspect of this. When you give if you don't give your data, you have a different price point for specific things. You're not offered maybe the same level of discounts. So the problem then becomes that we start making privacy this premium, if you will, right? If you can afford privacy and you don't care about getting discounts or getting lower costs, then, you know, you don't have to give this information. But for individuals who need this, right, who, you know, do not want to pay full price because it's quite expensive, they're kind of forced into trading this piece of data so they can get a lower cost for a particular product, right? And it also, you know, the lower prices serve as an incentive. So you can use these online sites, which of course require your personal information in order to gain access to those types of goods and services that are being offered. And Shweta, I don't know what you wanted to add here.
So yes, it's very, in the beginning when they started looking at, you know, we have to collect data and we'll give targeted advertising. The business model is still the same. They want to, the legitimate business model, if you call it legitimate, they just want to show you ads and they want you to click on ads because every ad you click on, they get money. So that's the business model. And then there are companies that would sell your data to third party, their own clients or whoever. And so then those guys can sell you ads or call you on the phone and tell you that your social security number has expired, or not expired, suspended. I get that call all the time. So that basically the data that we give up is used for phishing and wishing, often when they are selling the data to these questionable sources. But the general idea is to sell your data so they can show you more ads, interest level, sell you services. And it used to be just send you junk mail in your mailbox, I mean the physical mailbox, but now it is the electronic mailbox where the junk mail comes. But then more recently, they call you and they send you phishing emails. So that's the next topic that we wanted to discuss. And this is actually pretty important because we've been getting phishing emails in the John Jay network. I'm in John Jay email.
Yes, I mean, I can attest to the fact that there have been people that have, and I'm sure that many others here today might have a story like this, but I've had communications from a person impersonating a dean from another CUNY college, but saying something like, hey, I need your phone number to talk to you quickly. And, you know, I've had to send this message to this person to let them know that somebody's pretending to be them. Of course, it screams. It screams like it's a spear phishing attempt specifically, because the difference between phishing and spear phishing is just like casting like a really wide net and seeing what you catch, where spear phishing is a bit more targeted. But we've also started to see this greater evolution of phishing, which really targets higher level executives. It's been called whaling. It's also been called the business email compromise. It's been called CEO fraud. But we've started to see these large scale emails that target the people at the highest positions, the CEO, the CFO, to target these people to get access to funds that traditional employees would probably not have access to, at least the level of funds and the authorization that those in the higher level executive positions would. And in academia, we've been getting these types of emails. We've been getting emails of predatory, right, publishers or people pretending to be from, publishers, asking for people to submit information, right, their bank account information so they can transfer money. So they can get paid for particular journals that don't exist or publications that don't exist. And I'm sure, Shweta, you have examples that
right
as well.
So the email that used to come a long time ago from a prince who is ready to transfer $100,000 to your bank account, you just have to give them your routing number. So that's old school now. Nobody's falling prey to that. But then the evolution of these phishing systems, the next one was that there'll be a nice bank logo and there'll be a link that takes you to supposedly your bank's website, and they'll say your account has been compromised. Go here and change your password. I mean, that happened to very high profile people. That's how emails got stolen from Gmail accounts and so on. They would give you a link and you click on it and it goes to something that looks like your bank or your email system, but it's something else. We know how to, so that's why it's very, very important to understand that something is phishing or not phishing. So the most important thing is to, when you look at a link, don't click on it, just hover on it and look at the left corner bottom of your browser to see what is the URL that shows up over there. So when you hover on a link, it will show you where that link will take you, or you can right click on it and look at the source, or you can copy it and paste it on a notepad, whichever method you choose. It's very important to inspect the URL before you click on it. So I call it know what you're clicking at. And that's the first protection for phishing. That's the best protection for phishing, because then you won't fall prey to it. So you know not to click it if it pretends to be from Citibank, but it is going to Citibank. There are very subtle changes to the spellings when these kinds of things happen. So we have to be really careful and never rush to click on something. Yeah, so I have an example from a dean from another college who not himself, but the name on the email was clearly person I know. But if you look at the email address, then you'll know that it's not the person. So for example, if you see an email from Shweta Jain, and then you see, you think that I'm asking for your email, or I'm asking for your phone number, but if you look at the email address, not just my name, but the email address, you might find that this is from an external organization or some other domain, which you've never communicated with me in that. So it's important to see the email address for those kinds of emails, and anything that you receive, even if you think it's legitimate and it's coming from John Jay College, it's best to look at the URL first. It's like a habit forming exercise to look at the URL before clicking on it.
And I'm glad that you mentioned some of the approaches to better protect yourselves. And I think when we were talking about phishing, you mentioned the 419 scam that was made popular by Yahoo Boys. Like, phishing in that sense was designed to serve different other forms of scams, like the advanced fee fraud. But phishing also has the links that are associated with them for data capture, right? So you can input your details, they can capture it, and the perpetrators can use it. But they also have the malicious attachments. There have been individuals within the college that somebody has hacked into their account because they've been able to forward messages that individuals have already sent, but this time with attachments. So individuals seeing the former message thinks that it's a legitimate response when in fact it has a malicious attachment. And I want to say something else that I think is important for banks, right? Shweta, you mentioned something that's really interesting, that we started to see this. We're going back to phone fraud, because people have become wise to not clicking on links that come into emails. But the interesting thing that even now, phone fraud, people pretend to be your banks, right? And they'll leave you a message. And I say the biggest mistake that people will make is actually first talking to people if they don't leave a message, if they catch them, right, and they answer them. When they receive these types of messages that say your account has been compromised, I'm like, people live in New York City. They should say, I'm about ready to get on a train. What's your name? And I'll contact you. Never contact the number that they give you, but get their name and number. And then you contact the number that's in the back of your card. Like, you would never, because even if it's legitimate, you can still validate it based on the details that they gave you, right? By calling the legitimate number. But that's one of the things that we need to do. The problem, the reason why we become targets is, in this day and age, we seek instant gratification, right? Quick, we review social media, everybody's scrolling through things, everybody's just clicking on links, everybody's reviewing things. That quickness is what gets us in trouble, because we won't take that extra step to make sure that what we're actually looking at is coming from a legitimate source and includes legitimate data. We miss that verification. And that's it. We need to go back to taking that extra couple of minutes to making sure that what we are actually looking at is what it purports to be, right? And that I cannot stress enough. And then, yeah, let's go into, since we started talking about malware, I think that this is a great pivot point to this last segment of the presentation.
Right. So knowing where you're clicking is important, and it's important so that you don't accidentally get infected by a virus or a spyware. So there is definitely, they want your data, but they also want your data at any cost. One of the ways they would get it is if they can install a foreign program, which we'll call them malware, but there are different flavors of them. So they'll install that on your computer because you clicked on a link, or you executed a program, or you downloaded an attachment, or you let a macro run on an Excel sheet. So this is particularly problematic because now they can get all the data. They can have a keylogger installed, so they can steal passwords. They can take files and transfer them to another server where they have access to your files, and then they might encrypt everything to hold your data at ransom. So that was the ransomware attacks that we've heard about a lot, and people have to pay to clear their data and to prevent the cyber criminals from exposing their data in the public. But then there is another thing that's like affects the society, which is when a computer is being used as a zombie. So it becomes a part of a botnet. There is a zombie master. As soon as your computer gets infected by a botnet virus, it will phone home to the zombie master, and the zombie master can then command all these zombie computers to act as attackers to another online service. So the best way to protect yourself in case your computer is infected anytime is to shut it down, because they generally make use of your computer when you in the night or during the downtime, so people wouldn't know. They don't want to use your computer when you're active on it, because then you would find out that something's fishy. So they would make use of the computer sleeping, but not actually. This is basically using innocent people to attack another network. And that's pretty much, it's bad for the society itself. So that's one thing that happens. Ransomware attacks a computer and a person or an organization, but pretty much everything else on the slide, like the viruses and the Trojan, those not only affect you, but they also affect people around you. So an infected computer can send the infection to other computers around, like COVID-19. So you can spread the infection around just by having an infected computer. So all of this can be prevented if we are making use of a good antivirus. I think McAfee is available from CUNY. CUNY provides McAfee to us. And there are, all operating systems have their inbuilt security. We should never disable those. And my biggest thing is that it's always about know what you click on. And that itself is quite a big protection, and not downloading apps that you don't need, and just getting them for the sake of a little bit increase in productivity.
I mean, and the thing that I would also add is that when you leave your device on, right? And people leave it for a wide variety of reasons. They want their pages there, so they don't want the hassle of having to restart everything. It's not just that somebody can use your information for nefarious purposes, which is the biggest concern, right? As Shweta said, but they can even be using your devices and other devices that we'll talk about, because we'll circle back to the Internet of Things at the end, Shweta, because I think we kind of jumped over it, but I think it's important. But any other device that you have that's connected to the internet, and they'll use that bandwidth, that power, to basically launch attacks, collect information, do all of the things that we had previously described. And we should be concerned when our data is being utilized, even in that manner. I mean, if we think about the fact that somebody else is controlling our terminal and utilizing either for mining cryptocurrencies, for attacking other systems, they can also use that to spy on you. They can also use that to collect all of the data that you have and just monitor day-to-day activities of users. So practicing basic cyber hygiene is extremely important. And it's extremely important because we've seen the increase of crypto ransomware attacks, right, in organizations. So individuals who have never backed up their system, this is something that you need to be doing. Of course, even if you're infected with this type of malware, we've started to see variations of this, that individuals who haven't been paying the ransom have had their data leaked online, right, as a form of punishment for failure to pay the ransom. So there is still going to be a consequence. The reason why you back up your data is for yourself. So you will still have that really important data that you have, and you should have multiple places where you back this up, and not just the cloud, right? And I know a lot of people use the cloud, but I think that you also need to make sure that you have hard copies and other devices that really maintain your information. We wanted to close by saying, we talked about websites, we talked about apps, we talked about different types of cyber attacks, but really the situations that we identified just by using basic smartphones, websites, and apps really are exponentially getting worse now with the introduction of internet-enabled devices. Now, the devices that are really depicted on these slides are everyday objects that were not designed to be connected to the internet and yet are being connected to the internet. Your clothes, your jewelry, your any type of accessories that you have, right? All of your home items, right? And you have your washers, your dryers, your refrigerators, your thermometers, any type of different device in your home now that comes with a sensor. And in many cases, you don't have the choice. I don't want to say choice. You do have the choice. You can choose not to buy it. You don't have a good choice in terms of whether or not to adopt these devices, because many of these devices, these internet-enabled everyday objects like your microwave, your stove, your washer and dryer, your dishwasher, if you don't buy the internet-enabled version of it, it's usually tied to the warranty, or it's usually at a different type of price point. So slowly we're being forced into the use of these types of devices and bringing these devices into our homes. And of course, bringing these devices into a space that previously was considered the space to be protected, right? Inside of an individual's home. And of course, these devices collect a lot of data about users. And moving outside of the home, we're starting to see the development of these large-scale smart cities, right? And all of these devices were designed to function without users' input. So when we start seeing the Internet of Things realized the way that they were intended, you will walk into a home, you won't do anything, but your house will sense that you've had a bad day and will dim the lights and will pour you a cup of coffee, or will start the coffee maker or water brewing so you can put your tea. And this is the type of establishments, these are the types of homes that are being envisioned, right? And within cities, you will have all of these technological devices that will tell you about traffic, they'll tell you about issues that are occurring within the city, tell you where the best parking spot is. Slowly, we're starting to see some of these come to life. Shweta, I know you wanted to say something.
So these were such dreamy and interesting research topics. When I was at Stony Brook, we were looking at the conferences and people talking about, imagine how nice it would be if the toaster knows you're about to wake up and the toast is ready, right? And the coffee maker has started, and activity recognition. There were some really good intentions behind these things, though, because there was one piece of research to help Alzheimer patients be able to live their lives without assistance, because there was a talk about something that would remind people if they're forgetting something, like they're forgetting to take their pills, you remind them. They're making their coffee, but they forgot how, and you remind them, you prompt them what to do. So those were the good intentions, and they were all meant for a good purpose. But of course, as soon as the commercialization takes over, they're trying to become ubiquitous. And 5G has excellent protocols built in to support more and more of IoT, so Internet of Things devices, for industrialization, for industrial safety, for making homes better, for energy efficiency. Like when you're coming home, you just have to tell your phone to tell your home to start the boiler so that it's at a comfortable temperature by the time you get there, but the boiler is not heating up an empty home throughout the day. So those were all good intentions, but of course the data can be stolen if the security is not built properly. And that's where the threats come in. I don't think the technology is bad. It's just that the security has been an afterthought in all of these things. People are now getting better at it, and with 5G, there are talks about making sure that it's secure from the ground up.
And you mentioned too some very interesting types of IoT devices. We talked about the data potential compromise, but it's also the fact that someone can hack into like these types, the objects that are now connected to the internet in some way. You know, you can envision the fact that you were talking about the pills, the smart pill caps that they have that remind users to take their pills. You know, what if somebody sets it in a way that they send an extra reminder and somebody takes too many pills?
Yeah.
Or you know, when somebody's turning on the oven, they set it too high of a setting, or any of those other possible scenarios, because security and privacy were not part of the design. I mean, the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, the EU was talking about these concepts, right, of data protection by design and data protection by architecture. And this is the latter is particularly important. The architecture is baking and developing this technology with data minimization in mind, right? So in order for these devices to function, they should only collect that which is necessary for them to function. And that's an extremely important point here for all of the stuff that we're talking about today, because it's not just data protection by policy, because policy is really what we have today. The policy is that we deploy these devices and then we have a policy that says what we can do about it. But here in the US, I mean, we don't have protection. We don't have minimum standards for Internet of Things technology. And the interesting thing is when laws are passed, if you actually read the sections, there was an Internet of Things a law that discussed, and they had these bills it was talking about Internet of Things devices that the government would adopt. So for the rest of the public, we're left with not having those level of standards, right? And I think that this is something we should be discussing. We need to have these basic minimum cybersecurity and privacy standards, and we need to make sure that we also push forward legislation that focuses on privacy by architecture, data protection by architecture, and policy, because policy just means that these third parties that we have now, Google, the social media, they decide, right? They set the rules for us. And we've seen how inefficient this is, right? From the vast numbers of compromises that we have had in our data, right? I don't know what else we need to realize that this is the data protection by policy practice is ineffective.
Right, so the security by design and data protection by regulation, those are, I think those are the starting points. With 5G development, security has been thought of as the design. So they are talking about security at each layer. And so this is a step forward for everybody. And I hope it makes for better technology in the future. David has an excellent question. So what's a greater threat, malware, spies, or government commercial sector? Definitely malware and spies, because they are out there to steal your information and use your computer to attack other people, right? And for government, commercial sector is just trying to make money, and you can protect yourself from them by deleting your cookies, using incognito browser, all the best practices. Government, well, so government will get your data, whatever you do. There is no protection over there. They can subpoena anybody if there is a need for the data. So I don't have much to say on that.
You know, I think your question brings up an important, it draws attention to an important deficit that we have within this space, right? Because when we're talking about these threat assessments, I'm thinking about this from the criminological cybercrime data aspect of it. We don't have official measurement tools that tell us, like, for all cyber crimes, here is the data that we have for you. We have official crime measurement tools. We have some reporting mechanisms. You know, we have the National Crime Victimization Survey here. We have the National Incident-Based Reporting System. But when we're talking about understanding like the overall umbrella of all forms of cyber-dependent crimes, hacking, malware, distribution, et cetera, and cyber-enabled crimes, traditional crimes that are facilitated by the internet and communication technologies, we don't have that large-scale data sets. We rely on business surveys, which are very infrequent. We rely on cybersecurity companies to give that data, right? So we're essentially it's like getting your weather data from an umbrella salesperson, right? We have to, this just draws attention to the fact that we need to start creating these official crime measurement tools, these official cybercrime measurement tools, and good data research methods, right? To collect this information so we can have that. I would think that the threats are posed for by each, right? But they're different types of threats, right? When we're talking about state actors, there's a different type of threat that we're faced with. With the commercial sector specifically, they're not protecting your data the way that they should because they don't have to, right? So we need to understand why that's happening. And that's happening because we've allowed this space to basically operate without regulation, because the argument for decades has been any form of regulation to force security or privacy standards would harm competition and research and development. That is an old argument. It's not working anymore, right? And the only agency that we have that can keep these organizations honest is the Federal Trade Commission, which only covers new cases and they can't possibly cover all of the things that are happening within the space. And they can only do something to these companies if they deceived individuals in some way in marketing practices, in their description in terms of the services that they're offering. So this is not really a space that we've developed measures and policies that can protect users, right? And that can adequately deal with some of the threats that we've been talking about today. So I think we need to have a larger discussion on regulation and policy making, which is really not being implemented in a way that's consumer friendly or citizens friendly, I may add. So, oh yeah, we have a comment in terms of legislation, that the absence of legislation has to do with funding, and at least in some point of funding political campaigns. And right, lobbying actually plays a big role. Lobbying plays a big role for this. If we're waiting for, and I say this, and I understand the significance of this, if we're waiting for government to act in order to get this policy and regulation in place, we'll be waiting a very long time. What we can do though, is get users that actually use ICT devices, shop from these companies, to come together in a movement to demand these. That's the only way that we'll ever effectively see change. But unfortunately, it's not going to happen when these discussions happen in such a siloed way, right? I always said, I would tell my students that if I want to affect change in a technology company and I'm not happy with the new devices that they're implementing, I can't be the sole protester across the street with the one sign and hope to affect change. There needs to be more people that get involved, that do not adopt technology unless it meets the standards that they want that technology to meet. That's the way that we can actually affect change, because it hurts what? It hurts the profit margin of these companies. And we've started to see some change in companies that are privacy oriented because the public has demanded it. So if we monitor those shifts and those movements, it can actually tell us how we can affect change in other policy areas that are of interest.
Right. So Patrick has an excellent question about moving away from Google and its products and use another privacy-based search engine, encrypted email service. So yeah, so there is DuckDuckGo. The search results are, I don't know, they're not as good. Instead of Google, DuckDuckGo could be used, but it depends really on what you're looking for. if you're looking for, like, if we're doing research, we can always do our research in the library and use the databases, JSTOR, and for us, it's ACM and IEEE that we have that. But if we're looking for general products and services, if we know of a store, we could just go on the store's website directly instead of searching it on Google. I sometimes feel that I overuse Google. I shouldn't be using Google to check what website is for Model Sporting Good, for example. I could just go to Model Sporting Good because it's probably models.com, or I can hop around and find that. But yeah, so DuckDuckGo is an alternative. I don't know how good the results are. Encrypted email service. So in terms, it's not going to be encrypted to the provider. I mean, it's between you and the provider. We can use PGP, where you share your public keys with your recipients, and they can decrypt your message. Only they can decrypt your message because you've shared your public key with them.
And this is one of the privacy enhancing techniques we discussed earlier, like for people who are using different types of browser, Tor or any of this sort. The answers to your questions are to the extent possible for your first question, right, about Google, because a lot of times many of the things that we do on a day-to-day basis are tied to Google, whether we like it or not, because our academic institutions, our partners, they want to work with those products. The best way to deal with that is use those types of providers when you absolutely have to, and compartmentalize your activities. And I do this I do this as well at home. Like my devices do different things. Like one device is not going to do everything. Like compartmentalize things that you do every day, your everyday tasks, which browsers you'll use, and limit it to that. Things that you want to protect more, use another device. And again, this is where, and I hate making these recommendations because again, we're separating society, the haves, the haves not. If you have the resources to do it, here, you can protect yourself. But for everybody else that can only have that one device and can only use that, they don't have that luxury of doing this. I would use different types of search engines. I wouldn't recommend any because all of them to an extent are collecting information. But I mean, DuckDuckGo has been used, different types of, use different types of browsers for the specific activities that you want to protect yourself. Don't save any information there. Make sure that nothing is stored. At the end of it, that's key. Use any type of anonymizing features that you have. For encrypted email services, again, use it as needed. One of the things that I would recommend is that if you have to give your email address for different types of services, use different types of email addresses. I know who tracks me because, and this happened once accidentally, which got me really interested in this field. I remember signing up for a service provider and I told them on the phone what my name is. And of course they misspelled it. And I get the first bill and I'm like, I can't. I called like 3 times for them to change it and it didn't. Lo and behold, by the end of that year, I had so many marketing advertisements with that wrong name. And there was only one company this could be attributed to. And I'm like, this is interesting. And once I received that, it was over. Like from 2010 on, I've been trying to track to see who's doing what and who's providing this information. Because I think that this is important for us. You know that there are also apps out there that can give you like random phone numbers that if you have to do that, do that for the email address. Of course, it becomes tedious when you have like 20 email addresses that you have for different activities. But if you're using something more for social, just have one email for social. Make sure your professional is kept by itself, your institutional one, and make sure you have your own separate, and use an encrypted email service if you want for another type of activity that you have. I wish I could give advice just for one, but the reality is that we keep make it difficult for criminals to compromise you. Make them work for it. You know what I mean? That's the goal. It's not that you're not going to be targeted. It's just that you want to make their life as complicated as possible. So they give up on you and they move to somebody else. But unfortunately, my advice is still bad in this sense, because all we're doing is telling you not to be the low-hanging fruit. So we're reordering like who's actually going to be targeted, which is not quite helpful for obviously all of us as a whole.
So my last thoughts are that security is about values, locks, and punishments. So things that you value the most, you need to lock them up better. And since there are no strong legislations out there for the punishments, we'll have to protect ourselves using the first two principles of values and locks.
And I see that, Shweta, did you see the comment from Gina?
Yes, tip sheet. Yes, so Gina's got a very good point here. Tip sheet for students to attach with the syllabus and how to address these questions in class when students report to have been phished or scammed or express confusion. So yeah, it's a good point.
So this is interesting. I think obviously this is going to depend on the time that faculty members have to provide this information. Maybe something that we can all think about, because there are a lot of professionals in the room here that think about security and privacy in their day-to-day basis. Maybe for us coming together and creating that sheet for academics, that if they want to, they can provide, and if they don't have time to cover this, at least they can post it somewhere on Blackboard for students to have, but always with the preface, like, this isn't legal advice or anything of the sort. This is just things you can potentially do, right? Because I think that this is something that we should be doing. And I hate to say this, it's not just our country, but all countries around the world are really struggling with this, because we still have an outdated curriculum in primary and secondary education, right? Our students, you know, the new generations, the kids at school, they need to be taught about cyber safety. They need to be taught about cyber threats that they're faced with, because they're encountering devices at the age of 2 sometimes, right? And for the rest of us that kind of either did not grow up at all with technology, or like myself, grew up at a time where we were still developing this technology, when we had laptops that weighed 45 pounds. We also need to make sure that we communicate these practices. And I don't think we've done a good job generally as a country to do this, right? To this day, people don't know where to report cybercrime if it happens. And if they go to certain authorities, they're kind of ping pong to different locations, and then they just kind of give up, right? So what I think we can do is start that conversation and start here, but also maybe, and this is something that we can all work towards, like collaborating on different type of projects that can create this as a common practice rather than just an add-on, right? Or something that we think about afterwards. I don't know if you have anything else, Shweta.
No, I think those are all good advices. Yes, I think there are also some resources that are coming out of Europe on safer internet. I think it's called saferinternet.com, but I have to look it up.
Yeah. And you know, Adam's on the call here. I don't know if he's sorry to call you out, but we've given some co-presentations on this type of this topic about data and data privacy and how to protect yourself. There's so many different data technologies out there that you can actually see how much information exists about you, right? And there are these types of resources that you can access that can tell you if you're someone who uses social media, tweets, location of the tweets, all of your activities on Facebook, or any type of social media platform, the websites that have your data. So it's quite alarming. Like, if you think that you're someone who doesn't contribute to your active digital footprint and you think, oh, I'm okay, your passive digital footprint and then the data that other people post about you is something you should be concerned with, right? The same thing too with apps and all of these types of other features that these phones have, where people start adding your data to address books and your phone number, because that starts becoming consolidated and used, right, by a lot of these technologies when you didn't actually have a say in it. So do we have any more chat?
No. Ellen has shared a link on libraryfreedom.org, and I shared a link on Safer Internet for Kids.
I'll pull the links out of the chat later, and we'll create a document we can post for people to look at when they come back and listen to the recording. I want to continue just for a minute or two more about how we communicate with students, because I think the level of data and digital literacy is relatively low compared to the skill in manipulating devices. And this affects information literacy, it affects critical thinking, and it affects just practical processes about getting on and off Blackboard, using the library, things that influence how they're able to work with us in our classes and get what they need. And we may not even realize that we're not addressing these things. And it's not a matter of which username and password do I use. It's what do I do with my college email, my student email? And how is that different from other emails that I use? And why can't I use my other emails with my class? And suddenly my computer has been infected and I can't do my work. Well, there's more at stake there than being shut down, because being connected to everyone in the class might have other implications, right?
Right.
So you want to throw those out for a potential conversation here.
Right. If you're bringing an infected computer into the campus, you shouldn't be able to plug it in. That needs to be the case, but there is no good way to figure out that somebody's brought in an infected computer into the campus.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have an advantage here because I developed a cybercrime minor, and all we do is talk about cybercrime. So
right.
these types of issues come up all the time, because in order to let students know, I use examples. I use examples of how, you have to use your John Jay email address, because I will not respond to you. And I'll give you these examples of what happened with student compromised emails or faculty compromised emails as well. And how that puts everybody in danger in terms of information. I can't send you anything that has to do with your education, any scores, any grades, things are missing. That all has to happen through your John Jay email address. And those are conversations maybe for the John Jay email address as a quick fix for the non-technical or any type of technology courses. Maybe that can be something that we can create language in the syllabus. So just a few examples that kind of just some language that just show this. It's boilerplate. So people don't have to think about saying these things. They can use an example of why and be quite clear. Yes. And that answers the email portion of it. But you talked about digital literacy and this instant need for gratification. What I've noticed is the fact that it's not just about using the data, but it's also about understanding good data, like quality, right? That's the increasingly complicated things, like driving home the message that just because it exists online does not mean that it's good data, right? And the problem is I think it's because we kind of skipped something, right? When I was growing up, we were very resourceful. We had to be, right? Nobody gave you anything. If you wanted to find information, it wasn't available. You would go to the library, you would research this on your own, and you had no idea what you were doing, right? You would follow along, read the books, get this data. Now it's everywhere. So they're like, I don't have to do all this. Let me just find this. It's here. It's available. Must be good. It has somebody's name on it. Somebody has a website. And I think we have to figure out one way to get that resourcefulness back in, right? That, and many times, and this is probably not going to be popular, but I think it's important not to post articles that exist, but post the tools on how they can get the articles, and how they can get the information from the library without just having that on the platform. I'm a big proponent of teaching people how to search for it and giving them all the tools step by step. This is how you find the data. These are the articles, how you access it, rather than posting that information. But of course, this is something that is specific to an academic. And I'm not saying that this is something that needs to happen. I've just found that this has worked, rather than saying that these are the articles, these are the resources, these are the sources, the good sources that you can use. Let me help you search for this information in the library. But I won't post it on the platform, because then when they go to the next class, they won't know how I got it. How did I get this article? Where did I get it from? How did I choose this article instead of all the other articles that were on the platform? Why this one? And I think that that's what we need to start explaining, because we skip that step. We think that we're helping in this way by making things available, making it easy, but we're actually harming them, because when they move to the next level, they lost this knowledge that we're giving them, that tacit knowledge, right? The practical, the things that you express, that experience-based, it's lost, right? So maybe starting to engage in those conversations. That's just my humble opinion on that.
That's an excellent point. Actually, I learned something here. I've been posting the articles on Blackboard, and I think I will stop. I wouldn't give the direct link anymore. I'll just give the name and link to the library to go get it.
You know, I hear you, Maria, throughout the presentation, and Shweta, you've been supporting this in different ways, that there's a need to counter the habit of instant gratification with the development of habits of self-sufficiency.
That's an excellent way to put it.
And so we need to learn to be self-sufficient, which includes our own security, but it also includes the skills and the motivation and determination to find what we need, even if it takes longer, in order to be safer and better satisfied.
And that's an excellent point. One of the essential skills too is problem solving, right? How are we helping? And we're not helping in problem solving, right? We think that we're helping because we're providing that level of convenience, understanding that everybody has a really robust schedule, but problem solving, part of that is that self-sufficiency, that resourcefulness, that when they're tasked with something, that they're like, oh, I know what to do. I know this. I can use previous techniques that I've used to actually do this.
Right. So I would say, let's encourage those who are on the call to think about joining in on that tip sheet. We talked about co-creating, to encourage Shweta to talk with Senate Technology, Faculty Senate Technology, about some of these issues and ways to talk with faculty and provide extra support so we can continue conversations in class and provide extra guidance, because this is so essential going forward, especially if we're teaching hybrid and online much more than we ever did, right? We need to be able to see this for ourselves and offer, I think, better support for our students.
See a hand up. Is that you, Maureen?
Yeah, it's me. I just want to, I'm listening, and I'm the electronic resources librarian, and I know two of my colleagues are on the call too. So we're listening to you talk about posting PDFs and going, that's a licensing issue. You shouldn't be doing that, but you can in a little way. But I think this is a really big issue in terms of teaching students what to do. And even, I don't know how many of you, I just save my passwords, right? Because I can't be bothered with remembering passwords. I have a system, but it's probably a terrible system. And I think students, every time you make a student click, you lose one. Google Scholar, if you're looking at on the academic side, does such a wonderful job indexing things that you would be a fool not to use Google Scholar increasingly to get academic stuff because of the number of clicks, right? Okay, it doesn't have all the content. There are tons of reasons we can tell you and not to use it all the time. But I think what I think we need to do with students is start with low-hanging fruit. Give them a couple of things to do. Don't make all the things you described today. I don't know. I can't imagine many of them will buy into all those. They're not paranoid enough yet. So I think if we can come up with a list of things like low-hanging fruit is always where I want to leave it. Something like, clear your cache every day, turn your computer off at night.
I think that's excellent advice.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. No, it is. I mean, I jokingly tell my students, if you like your technology, you shouldn't take my class because at the end they're gonna be like, why? So maybe I am creating some more paranoid individuals at the end. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's also the level of risk that you have, how risk averse you are.
Right. So some people will just turn it all off. you know, and I've tried that a little bit. I just started using Google Gmail. I resisted as long as I could, but I couldn't do it this year. You know, so, yeah. So I think that giving them something that they can actually pull off, like clearing their cache, is the way I'm thinking about it initially.
Patrick, you have your hand raised, and then
yeah,
you had an example.
Yeah, just to follow up too, because I know the conversation with students and with you saying just by sending them the articles, like, you know, I'm one of Maureen's colleagues from the library. If we haven't met yet, I'm still relatively new to the John Jay community, but you know, we do offer library instruction classes, which you usually offer to like English 101 and history classes and stuff. And the whole goal was teaching them how to use the library databases and to start teaching more information literacy and searching techniques, which can be taken from the databases and the library webpage into the outside world as well, although we don't really touch on privacy issues at all. But I would highly suggest, if you are just putting all your stuff on the syllabus, I find it, when I was a student, particularly in grad school and part of my undergrad, was they made us hunt for it, you know, and if you learn your abilities. So I really think it's a disservice in many ways. And also, like Maureen said, like a licensing issue of just always putting the stuff and making it available, especially when the resources are here, where you can have a class trip to the library to sit down, to work with an information professional to show you how to do this, or schedule a one-shot in your own classroom. You know, I've always got great feedback, and I've had other students from the classes that I'm in, like, contact me directly to ask for additional information and move forward. And just with the ease of doing it, you know, it's definitely a good first step forward. You know, I also, so I put the link for the link to the library webpage where you can request, you know, the additional services. So, and there's also great resources as well too for just faculty in general within the library, that, you know, stuff we pay for and subscribe to that might be able to help you further with your semester as well too, and your course load.
No, thank you. And thank you for also providing information on the resources, but also talking about the issues with copyrights and use. You know, that's the topic that I always struggle with. And I always tell my students, come on, we have to have a conversation about this. Just because you can find this online, this is still illegal. Making like photocopies of all of these, sharing software that doesn't belong to you, bypassing licenses, and it's a slippery slope. And I think it's important for everybody to realize that we have to start having these conversations, which are not popular, but are true, so people know what they can do legally, what they have access to, and of course, how to best utilize the resources that we have at the college.
Henry, I hear you had a comment.
Okay, so it was an example. Can you all hear? Is that I'm doing an independent study with a student this summer, and he's a transfer student, and he turned in a horrific paper. And I said, you didn't cite anything, nothing looks official. This is a fact gathering document. What happened? And he says, well, I don't know where to start. I said, go to John Jay's library. Have you searched on? No, I've never done that. He's two classes away from graduating. And because he's a transfer student, what he didn't get there, he's definitely not going to get it at John Jay unless we catch it. So I think we need some kind of onboarding when students come to the college where they just have to take this online course. And that for transfer students, we can't assume that the junior colleges, the community colleges did their part. So I feel like they should have an onboarding. And it was just an aha moment for me. I just stopped teaching. We have a weekly check-in, scrapped the next writing assignment, and we just searched, like, here's how you find facts. But it's concerning because He's got one more, technically after this, he's got one more class and he's graduating. I'm thinking, you've never used our library? So I just wanted to share that because I was in the hallelujah moment as you all were talking.
Yeah, it's real life example. Now, my internet connection is so unstable, I have blipped out a couple times in the last 5 minutes. Before it happens again, I want to thank Maria and Shweta for just a fabulous presentation and conversation. This has been great. We hope that we can do this again sometime. And in the meantime, we'll follow up via email. We'll get this recording edited. We'll get the chat shared, pieces that are important. And thanks so much for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of the summer.
Thanks
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.